Hey everybody, welcome to Truth Be Told. Captain Ron here. Tony has run across the street, so I'm going to be doing this myself. And today's guest is fantastic. We've had him on before. His name's Brien Foerster. He's a researcher who's explored more than 90 different countries, and his true passion is researching and writing about ancient megaliths, which is also something that I and Tony both share as one of our favorite topics in this arena. He's written 23 books. He's appeared on Ancient Aliens 15 times, as well as many other TV shows, including Truth Be Told. Please welcome back to the show, Brien Foerster. Can you hear us, Brien?
Thank you.
There you are.
Yes,
Good.
I can. Thank you.
Good to see you. Last time we saw you was at the Contact in the Desert last year.
That's right.
That was great. What we were talking about last year at this time was the DNA testing you had done on the Paracas skulls.
Mm-hmm.
Have we got any updates on that? Has anything changed or any other further developments in that arena?
Yeah, the great thing was that I was just getting messages from the geneticist in the United States about an hour ago. And so recently we sent samples from two perfectly preserved elongated skulls to two laboratories, one in the US and one in Canada. And the samples were so good that the laboratory in the US was able to extract the entire genome from both of the skulls, which is incredible considering that they're 2,400 years old.
Right. That's amazing. And did we get any, remember, we had talked about there was something like in the, it was in the Middle East or it was a surprising location.
Yeah, it's actually Eurasia,
That's
which
what it
is,
was.
or more specifically, the Caspian Black Sea area.
Right, which we wouldn't expect to find in South America, certainly from that
No.
long period ago.
Oh, no, not at all, because, of course, the first foreigners supposedly that landed on the coast of Peru was in 1532 AD, which would be Pizarro and the Spanish conquistadors.
Right.
And we're talking about an ancient elongated skull culture that died out 2,000 years ago.
Yep. I feel that there's so many different anomalies with these skulls. The not having the same sutures as we do, and the different things, like you said, that the spinal cord goes in a little bit further back. Like, there's definitely different genetic anomalies, right?
Well, exactly. And I could, the smart thing would be to actually show you.
Oh, you
So
did this
this is-
yesterday. You did a stream yesterday with that skull, right?
That's right. And I did one today with another one I'm going to
great.
show you that's even more interesting.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, so people are going to say, well, this is a very small skull. Well, it is, but because when we look at the dentition, this person was a female that died at probably 9 years old. But what you're going to see is the eyes are larger than normal.
Yep.
And then of course the other classic characteristic is the suture. You see this suture coming down this way.
Right.
And then there's supposed to be a suture coming back this way to connect with the occipital plate.
Which most all other types of humans have, correct?
All Homo sapiens have that.
Gotcha.
Like all. So as I turn it, you can see there's no suture whatsoever.
Right.
So that's a major anomaly.
But isn't
Also,
it possible, Brien, that this could be a branch off, and that just be a genetic that they form differently?
Yeah, actually, that's what the evidence is pointing to. There are also these little tiny plates you can see here, these little bones.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not characteristic of Homo sapiens sapiens. Except the royal Inca family or class of people had these bones. So I think that the Paracas may have been part of the ancestry of the Inca. And then underneath, when we look, this is what's called the foramen magnum, and that's where your spinal column enters your skull.
Okay.
So in us, it should be here. It should be more than an inch forward, because that's the balance point of the skull.
Yeah, you balance your head on there. Right. That feels like it's too far back almost.
Yeah, it's as far back as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
And it's also half the diameter of a normal human foramen magnum. So that means that their necks were half as thick as ours and probably longer.
Yet they have a heavier skull. You think they would have the opposite?
Well, they have like a larger skull,
Yeah.
that's for sure. The weight thing, we have to do updates about that because that isn't necessarily the case anymore. And this of course is what happens when you're continually doing research, is that new information comes up. But the most intriguing thing about our major DNA study that was done with 18 different skulls, the conventional story you would think that would come out of that would be we were able to get mitochondrial DNA from quite a few. So that's the mother side of the family.
Okay.
And so if they were a pure Native American ancestry, their haplogroup would have been either A, B, C, or D, because those are the haplogroups of the ancient Native Americans that crossed over from Siberia. But of the 19 samples, only 2 of them turned out to be of those 4, and that's group B. All of the others were from most commonly the Caspian Black Sea area, and that's also where the other largest elongated skulls in the world have been found.
All right. Which is so surprising. I think that's incredible. I don't think anybody associates that part of the world with these skulls.
No, they don't. But I've seen the few photographs that exist on the internet. You can see all you have to do is type in Black Sea elongated skull, and you'll see a few specimens which are almost identical looking to the Paracas.
Interesting. And now, what's the difference? But how do we know this wasn't bound? Isn't it also a different shape? Because I know that many of these cultures bound the children's heads and made them purposely elongated.
Yeah, basically, there were many cultures that did that. The Maya did it. The Olmec may have done it. Lots of tribes on the west coast of Canada and into Washington and Oregon and Europe and Melanesia and Australia. But
Wow.
they almost all of them tend to be cradle headboarded, and you can tell that because you simply have the back and the front of the skulls flattened. Like this will be flat and this will be flat. But the cranial deformation doesn't explain this protrusion here in the forehead. And then also this skull is actually very rounded at the back. So.
And then do we have a time period that these skulls sort of disappeared, like we know past a certain year, say 2,000 years ago or something? Is there a cutoff where we no longer see these skulls?
Well, it depends where you look around the world. So in terms of the Black Sea, Caspian Sea area, we're talking roughly 2,000 to 2,500 years ago, with the few that have been accounted for so far. And the Paracas are basically the same. They're 2,000 to 2,500 years ago. So they're contemporary. Whereas when you get into something, a culture like the Maya, they were around 600, 700 AD kind of thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So what's the next step? What's the next step in trying to drill down further about these skulls? Do you have plans personally to continue this?
Oh yeah. Well, I live in Paracas, Peru, which is
Right.
where the skulls. That's the homeland of these ancient people. I'm basically the only researcher in the world looking at them. Academics, of course, are completely ignoring them and just saying it's all head binding. But more and more as time goes on, I show the what I call the natural skulls to medical professionals, and none of them can explain the physical characteristics, like having the foramen magnum an inch back from where it should be. You don't do that from binding. That's obviously something genetic.
Clearly, that one's a no-brainer. Exactly.
Yeah, and
Now,
this is the one I did today. So this is even more.
Oh wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder why
So,
we can't get more serious medical doctors to look at this and more research to come out. Are they so afraid of the alien topic, or what do you think it is that we can't get people to take a more thorough look at this?
well, actually, I'm focusing more on medical professionals than I am university academics, and I've had a lot of them that have thrown their weight into and support of what I'm looking at, which is great. And these are doctors and dentists and nurses who are independent, so they're not going to get a lot of pressure from academic overseers, and that's the pursuit that I'm continuing on with.
Well, if you look online, I'm sure you've seen this. There are people that challenge your position on these things and kind of debunk it. What do you say to critics about what you've done?
Well, the basic thing is look at the data, look at the evidence, and look at the opinions of medical professionals, because this is less and less a story about archaeology. It's about physical human or humanoid evidence. Also, we're starting to narrow in on the idea that they were not Homo sapiens sapiens, but were capable of breeding with Homo sapiens sapiens. So my present theory is that they were either Homo sapiens Paracas, but now from the DNA lab, because they're doing, this will take quite a while because it's a no expense limit on this study. It's being done by an institute that I'm friends with, and they're sparing no expense on this. They want to get to the bottom, and since we're able to get hold of the whole genome, they're coding the whole genome of these people, which will tell us everything about them. And so he even said, and I'll look at my recent message from him. Well, one thing he said is, I just ran the analysis for the haplogroup of skull 2, because there are 2 that are presently being studied. He says, it aligns with the R haplogroup, which is more closely related to probably the Eurasia area. And he said, very unusual to find that haplogroup in 2,000 plus year old remains in Peru. And then he also describes them as possibly being may be indicative of a sister species to Homo sapiens. So,
I mean,
what are the detractors going to do about that?
Right. That would be incredible. What an amazing discovery that would be.
Well, it's more, I don't want to overplay it, but it could be as important as finding Neanderthal.
Exactly. It's another branch. I think it's awesome. I really do. I think a lot of people early on, it was the whole alien thing because of the shape of the heads and the eyes, and we need to step away from that, because even if it's just another branch, I think it's exciting.
Oh yeah, very very much so. And we know of Neanderthal, which initially academics said, well, you found some bear fur or something, and then you had Denisovan, which is being studied now.
Yep.
Like very little actual DNA has been extracted because only a few samples have been found. Then you have the Homo florensis, who were the Hobbit people of Indonesia. They were scoffed at it initially, and now they're an actual different species. But what we do know is that Neanderthal and Homo sapiens sapiens were able to interbreed, and most likely Denisovan as well. So that means that subspecies of Homo, genus can interbreed with each other, and that's obviously what happened with the Paracas. They arrived from somewhere else, and then over the course of time, they bred with local, normal-looking people. That caused the skull shape to start to shrink and start to look normal-looking, and that's when the cranial deformation or head binding would have begun to maintain the difference in look between this noble class of people and the common classes.
I mean, it makes sense just talking about it. Doesn't it seem like that's what they would maybe do, because they want to emulate these folks?
Yeah, and it's getting, it's becoming more and more obvious to me. I'm open to be proven wrong, but I'm not being proven wrong. We're getting more and more data. I can even tell you about. I don't know if we ever discussed the blood type analysis that was done.
No, we didn't.
Oh well, this is really big too, because there was a report done in the 1970s of 14 samples of Paracas blood that was found on ancient textiles. And the fact that it even survived from 2,000 years is amazing, but they were able to do blood type analysis. And so the standard story is that all Native American people from at least Mexico down to the southern tip of South America were 100% blood type O. But when they did the analysis of the Paracas, blood type O, 43%.
Wow.
Blood type A, 28.5%, blood type B, 7.1%, and blood type AB, 21.4%. So that by itself is telling you that they were very complicated in terms of their genetics and heritage.
And now that we know that it's also found in the Baltic Sea area, that would almost make sense that they would have that other, just like those people probably do.
No, that's a very good point too, because an area like the Baltic Sea is not, it's not in the middle of nowhere. It's, it's the crossroads of major civilizations over the course of thousands upon thousands of years.
Absolutely. I think it's amazing, and I think it's I wish we could kind of definitively find this out more so that people would just kind of accept it. It's always so hard to push these things. Like you keep saying that, well, they didn't believe the Neanderthal, and then we did, and we didn't believe the little people, and then we did, and then all these things. It takes science so long to accept. I get anxious.
Well, I agree, but that's why we're in a completely different age now. The audience I'm appealing to is the human population, and not the scholars. It used to be that you had to go through this academic filter before anybody would accept anything. But through the internet, you can present your findings to the world, and it's up to the world population to look at it. And that's my approach. And of course, contact in the desert.
Totally. I love how you walk around these places and give people an opportunity to see these things. And it seems to be a reoccurring theme in all of your videos all over the world. It seems that the older bottom layer structure is the more advanced. And that's something that you kind of point out all the time, and you've seen it all over the world.
Yeah, that in general, that's the case. I actually just put up a video on my YouTube channel of a site in Oaxaca, Mexico that we visited last month called Mitla. And it's, probably nobody's heard of it. Most people haven't even heard of Oaxaca, which is one of the states of Mexico. But it's a phenomenal site where you have basically, very rough small stone and adobe mud construction. And on top of it are these beams that weigh 6 to 18 tons apiece. So that's a case where the Zapotec people who built Mitla, they found these massive beams and they simply recycled them.
Right. Which is
so
common,
that's
right?
That's a case where it's not and actually the foundations are megalithic too. So that's a case where a later culture was able to somehow move these 6-ton beams up and recycle them and put them back into place. But the difference between these basalt beams and the other construction is night and day.
It's incredible. Like even how like in Baalbek, where they built on top of those giant structures, because they didn't do those.
No, that's very true. There are three stones at Baalbek that weigh 1,000 tons apiece. There's one in the quarry that's 1,200 tons. There's another they just discovered that's 1,600 tons, which I'll be seeing next month when I go to Baalbek. And then you have this much, much smaller Roman construction on top. Again, it's night and day. It's not like you have a graduated series of construction techniques. Right. You have profound, and then you have inferior.
It's 1,200-ton blocks and then little tiny stones. It's very obvious. Yeah, to me, I think that there's basically two ways that this could have happened. Either obviously we had an extremely advanced human technology to be able to cut these giant blocks and move them, and that somehow got lost, or we had help from outside of our, from aliens or whatever, right? It's one of those two,
Yeah.
it seems.
Well, yeah, I get asked that question all the time, and there are only two possibilities. Either one, advanced human civilization, more advanced than what we are technologically, or an alien, or a number of different alien
Right.
groups that came down and maybe decided to do this because they wanted to for their own purposes, or maybe to assist us. But I don't think there are any other alternatives to look at. You're either talking Atlanteans or you're talking aliens.
Right. So where do you fall on that after looking at all of these structures for so long? Are you leaning one way or another?
Yeah, I'm leaning more I have to say I'm leaning more towards aliens. Yeah. Because there's almost no evidence at all of Atlantis whatsoever. Recently they found that thing called the Reshat structure in Mauritania, which is a series of concentric rings which match Atlantis, but and also you're looking at different civilizations working. The work done in Egypt is completely different from the work in Peru, and the work in Pumapunku is completely different than anything else on the planet. So you're talking at least three advanced civilizations, not, a lot of people keep saying a global civilization. I think there were at least three, if not more.
Interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit, if we could, for a minute about Easter Island, which is another fascinating place, and I love when you're down there. You had said you pointed out how there's no basalt quarries on the island unless you go way out into the ocean, which we'd have to go back 12,000 years to mine that. So that's something I hadn't heard before, and I thought it was fascinating because we always think that they used what they had there, but they didn't have access to quarries of basalt.
Actually, we were just there in November, and there is a basalt quarry. Actually,
there is. I thought I heard you saying that they had to go into the water. That you thought it had to have been 11,000 years ago for before the Polynesians even got there.
Well, that's why you have to go to these places like many times. If somebody goes once, you're not, honestly, unless you're a genius, you're not going to pick up all the information. So it takes repeated visits. And so when we were there in the end of November, we had a brilliant local guide who said, there is a quarry for basalt. It's not a huge quarry, but there is a basalt quarry located about 5 miles or 10 miles, no, 5 miles from the nearest major megalithic structure. So the stones could have been taken there, but supposedly the major quarry for basalt is underwater, and that was mapped using sonar by Jacques Cousteau in the 1960s or 70s.
And I like how that date matches up again. All of these things always point to the, 10,500 BC-ish.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time. And then you also pointed out that I thought it was fascinating that these hats that we see on the Moai that you think may in fact be a hairstyle.
Well, again, that's the great thing about getting in with local people. And we were able to meet who I would regard as the greatest wisdom keeper left on Easter Island. Their population was decimated by disease and slavery and all sorts of things. The fact that they have any of their ancient information left is astonishing. But he confirmed that. I said, why, the so-called top knots on the Moai. He said, that's the hair color. And I said, how many different civilizations have come here? And he said, how far back do you want to go?
That's great.
So he said multiple civilizations use that as a stopping off place. And even the Rongo language, which is the only glyph language that you find in Polynesia, is located on Easter Island. And he stated that comes from the Indus Valley.
Wow. I love that. Do you also, you've been to so many of these places. I'd like to see what you think the strongest evidence? You've already said you kind of come down on the alien side of this argument. What would be the strongest cases? Is it Baalbek? Is it Aliantambo, or however you say that in Peru? Those stones way up on top of the Andes. Those are two of my favorites that feel beyond human technology. But what do you think the best evidence is?
Well, I think the best evidence is so far is located at Pumapunku in Bolivia, which again is a unique site. There's nothing like it on the earth at all. People say, well, it looks similar to. It's like, no, there's nothing like it.
No, exactly.
Then I would say the megalithic structures in Peru, including Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman, and even the core of Machu Picchu is megalithic, and also Egypt. What a lot of almost everybody focuses on the Great Pyramid, but there are more discoveries being made of tunnel systems underground that were built on purpose. And so that's something else that we're going to be exploring next month when we go to Egypt, including the Osiris shaft, which is a shaft I've been in that goes 200 feet under the Giza Plateau in the bedrock.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing. And actually, Patricia Aoyan, who's in charge of our tour, right now she's in Abydos, which is an ancient site in Egypt, and she's going to get access to a recently opened up tunnel that goes for at least 800 feet in the bedrock. So the great thing about Egypt is that rather than locking things up, they're actually opening doors of these ancient places now.
Is this the new administration running the country? Is that what it's from, or is it just the Antiquities Division? What's causing that to open up?
Yeah, that's the great thing. There's a guy whose name I won't bother to mention, who was in charge of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, who was he was controlling everything, and so it was him and the Antiquities Department, and also some foreign academics who don't want the story of Egypt rewritten, who were controlling what was accessible and what wasn't. But the new antiquities minister is brilliant. He's the one who opened up the Osiris shaft, I think about 2 years ago. It's a place where you have to pay a special fee. So it's only for groups, and it costs, I think, something like $3,000 for 2 hours, but we paid for it. And we were able to film the whole thing. And now this other tunnel's opened up. And I've heard that I'm going to get access to another series of tunnels at another location relatively close to the Giza Plateau. So they're actually opening things up and monetizing ancient Egypt, which makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't there some recently, we've been talking about the chambers under the Sphinx, they say that... Robert Schoch had saw that there was some chambers that they found under certain parts of the Sphinx.
Oh yeah, no, he was able to use ground penetrating radar, and there is at least one chamber near the left paw. Also, there's a wooden walkway in between the front paws of the Sphinx, and that wasn't put there for the benefit of the tourists. It was put there to hide the entrance to the tunnel system under the Sphinx. And then as well, there's an opening at the back of the Sphinx that actually fell out the last time we were there. And I was actually able to find old video footage of two Egyptologists going into there, and they went in there daily for 3 weeks.
Into the back of the Sphinx?
And then they came out after 3 weeks and said, oh, we didn't find anything. But stupidly, what one of them did is, because he has a really big ego, he allowed a filmmaker to go in with him. So there is on the internet, somewhere on YouTube, you can see video footage of part of the underground system under the Sphinx.
Wow. I thought there was old photographs that you could see on top of the Sphinx's head. There was a hole, and they think people could have gone in there. Is that true too?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they're old photographs of it open. Later, they filled it in with concrete. But then I was sent another vintage clip from, I think, 1996 or something like that, where again, one of these academics took a filmmaker with him. He climbed up on the back of the Sphinx and opened up a metal trap door and stuck the camera down. And it's a shaft that goes down at least 100 feet into the Sphinx. So that insinuates that parts of the Sphinx are hollow.
I got to imagine that somebody's already gone through all this and explored it and cleared out anything that was in there, don't you think?
Probably, but I think the most intriguing facts are that there are tunnel systems under the Giza Plateau and under the Sphinx. They probably connect with each other. They probably connect to the Osiris Shaft. And again, that's why it's so exciting that some of these places are being opened to the public or to private access to a group kind of thing. So I'm very happy with what's going on in Egypt now. It's very exciting.
I think it's fantastic. And I love the fact that there's still new stuff coming out of there. I feel like this picture's just starting to fill in to kind of see what's actually what the whole plateau was about.
Right, and also when most people think of the Giza Plateau, they simply think of the three big pyramids. But the Giza Plateau area goes on for miles upon miles upon miles, like through sites like Saqqara and all of this. And there are stories which hopefully we can prove that there are tunnel systems that go for at least 10, if not 20 miles under the Giza Plateau, and maybe even connecting to Karnak, which is, I think, more than 100 miles away.
That's incredible. 20 miles is hard to believe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just think it's just amazing how complex this was. I'd love to have seen this 8,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, some estimates are that at least 85% of pre-dynastic Egypt was constructed on purpose underground. It's not that they're going to be digging up the sand and find things. It's this tunnel and rooms and chamber system that interconnects and goes north, south, east, and west.
What are your thoughts on the age of this of the pyramids, for example? Because I mean, everyone in our community says 10,000 years ago, and yet every time I put on something on TV, they say 4,000 years ago, and it drives me crazy.
Well, they always say 4,500 years ago.
Yeah.
About not only Egypt, but also other locations. Like they say that about Stonehenge. But I was at Stonehenge in September with Maria Wheatley, who's one of the leading experts. And she was able to get access we were able to walk up within half an inch of all the big stones, which are not allowed, that takes very special permission.
Sure.
But she said that independent radiocarbon or carbon-14 tests that have been done at Stonehenge dated at 12,000 years too.
See, everything's back there. Everything's 10 to 12,000 years ago in our world.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I get so angry when I hear it on the television when they say 4,000. Why do they fight that?
Well, the thing is that they can't fight the data. Like they can't, the more data that we're able to acquire, the more it's difficult for them to battle against it. So I think, I've even heard that some of the guides in Egypt now are talking about pre-dynastic construction, which they were not talking about a year ago. So This is how things are opening up.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to see that. And it's the same thing. It's always much older than the mainstream archaeological community says and the government says. And it's just they're so resistant, and I'm always angry to think why. If it's 5,000 years ago or 10,000? Why is it a problem for you to accept that this happened 10,000 years ago? I don't know what they're protecting.
But there's also mounting evidence of a giant series of cataclysms that happened about 12,000 years ago. So the reason why the dating, we're basically putting it 12,000. It's 12,000 plus. So this is, I guess the proper term to use is pre-cataclysmic construction versus post-cataclysmic. And there's mounting evidence that the series of cataclysmic events happened around 12,000 years ago, and that these ancient sites we're looking at are 12,000 plus years old.
And that's before, you're talking about, how's the Ice Age factor into that?
That's exactly at the end of the last ice age.
Right.
So the end of the last ice age was incredibly fast and dramatic. If you look at the work of Graham Hancock and or Randall Carlson and many others, you see that the end of the last ice age took, some estimates are like 10 years or maybe even a year. Like we're talking
Quick.
The incredible flash melting of ice. They also recently found not a meteorite. What was it? A large object that crashed in northwest Greenland about 12,000 years ago. An asteroid made of iron and nickel that's a mile in diameter.
Wow.
And it had the force of 47 million Hiroshima bombs. So that could have been the agent by itself.
Now, do you? This probably is outside of your area, but I mean, you've gone everywhere. What about all this new news coming out of Antarctica? That seems to be the hot thing now, that they're discovering new things with all the melting that's going on. They're finding things under the ice in Antarctica.
Yeah, I find it very intriguing. I think it is the hot spot. Of course, they're trying to hide it as much as possible, but thanks to modern technology and independent research, we could be looking at a major discovery. Another thing to possibly consider too is that 12,000 years ago, I honestly think that the cataclysmic events were so horrific that it caused our planet to go from vertical to 23 degrees. And so that means that 12,000 plus years ago, part of Antarctica would have been temperate. And so that could be the site of ancient Atlantis. And, then it was flash frozen in ice when you had the Earth suddenly tilting like that.
I also think that Antarctica, if in fact some of these things become exposed, it could force disclosure. It could force the realization and acceptance that there was. What if we find a giant base or a ship or a pyramid or something that proves that an alien race was here? I mean, they may not be able to cover that up.
No, I think that's very much the case. And the good thing is that there's so many different people looking at this stuff now that they can't control all the information that's out there. It's impossible. So that's what's wonderful about all of this. And you have great satellite mapping. You've got all these different apps for your phone that you can use.
Right. Wait till Hidden Inca Tours goes down to Antarctica. That'll be the adventure.
Well, actually, I grew up in Canada, so snow and ice are two things I never want to see again.
Well, Brien, what's next on the agenda for you?
Well, in 2 weeks, we're heading for Egypt and Lebanon and Jordan. So we're going to Petra, which is also ancient megalithic.
Love it.
Most people don't understand that Petra is 7 miles long. It's not just the famous scene from Indiana Jones. It takes all day to see Petra. We're, of course, going to Baalbek.
7 miles long?
Yep, 7 miles.
Of carvings and everything?
Yep.
That is amazing. I had no idea that was that large. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, the famous treasury, which is in the Indiana Jones films, and 99.9% of photographs of Petra are that location. That's maybe 3% of Petra.
Wow. Amazing. And then you'll be swinging back around to Los Angeles to come to the Contact in the Desert.
Oh, you bet. I think this is either my 4th or 5th time, and every time it expands by at least 1,000 people.
Absolutely.
The new venue at Indian Wells is phenomenal, just a phenomenal integrated resort. Before, it was a great location in Joshua Tree, but this is where everything is in one building.
Right, we have this one compound, this huge compound. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and of course it's going to sell out I'm sure there'll be 5,000 people attending this year, and phenomenal speakers. It's just a great experience for interacting with people from all sorts of different fields. It's not just about UFOs, but it's about lost ancient high technology and all sorts of other areas, metaphysics, and all sorts of stuff that complement each other and overlap and integrate with another. So it's a must do.
I agree. That's very well put. The way they integrate with each other, and you can see overlapping, and you can see how things kind of match up. I think that's a real strong part of the whole experience.
Yeah, definitely. So it's not just for people interested in UFOs. It's for people interested in alternative research of, in lots of different fields that do, as I said, they do overlap each other. There's lost ancient technology may very well relate to UFOs. Futuristic healing could relate to lost ancient technology and UFOs. Metaphysics relates to lost ancient technology and UFOs and healing, and on and on and on it goes.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I feel I like all of these topics, and I really genuinely want to get to the truth. I am so aggravated by not knowing the real answers. That's what motivates me, and that's what interests me in these topics, is that I want to get to the truth of what happened. And it really, you can clearly see that what we learned growing up was completely wrong. We've already accepted a lot of those things, but I want to get further. I want to find out how old is the pyramid exactly, how old, when was this made, who made it, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, also the great thing is, I noticed last year at Contact in the Desert, the presenters there was less of them defending what they believed. It was more they were simply showing the evidence, and they were very confident in what they believe, because a lot of it's based on data and logic. It's not based on woo-woo and necessarily channeling could work too, but I felt a much stronger sense of community and a very diverse group of people who came to attend, like from children to great-grandparents kind of thing, from working class to hyper wealthy to middle class. It just a growing group of people who are honestly seeking the true nature of who we are and where we come from.
Totally. And I like that communal feeling of like-minded people that are open to these ideas. And I do like, you're right, a lot of it is data-based, and that excites me, because I talk to a lot of people in my day-to-day life that just dismiss this out of hand like nothing. They don't want to hear it, they don't believe it, they don't whatever. And it's like there's a lot more evidence for a lot of these things than people realize.
Yeah, it's growing like very rapidly. I'm not sure if it's really like that fast, but it's day by day there's more data coming in from different parts of the world, which is more evidence of this ancient series of cataclysms, from geology, from ancient traditions, from lots of physics, etc. So that's what's so amazing, is that the speed of increased knowledge is almost going exponential.
Right. It snowballs. It's great.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, Brien, well, we're going to have to wrap this up, and I look forward to seeing you here at May 31st at Contact in the Desert. It's going to be great. And why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. Well, right down in the description under my name there, Hidden Inca Tours. It's not simply a tour site. It's 8 gigabytes of 95% free information. So I've made 1,121 YouTube videos, 36 books now.
Wow.
Lots of articles about all sorts of places I've been around the world. And it's more or less a free database website. So everything about me is located there.
Wow, 36 books now. That's fantastic. Good for you.
Yeah.
And I think your YouTube figure's wrong. I think it's 1,400,000 videos on YouTube, because every time I go on there, I just said I found you with that little skull. You've always got something new on YouTube, and it's great. It gives people a chance to experience these sites that don't have an opportunity to do so in person.
Yeah, I'm actually approaching 60 million views, which is very exciting.
That's fantastic. Good for you. All right, Brien, well, thanks again for coming on Truth Be Told, and we'll see you here shortly. Thanks again for coming on.
Okay, thanks a lot, Captain Ron.
Bye-bye.
All the best.